So now pivoting over to part two of this story, I am curious to see what that workflow, what the troubleshooting workflow would look like if the issue weren't on the back end side. And so this story for part two begins where, the SRE team and myself are investigating a drop in a business KPI regarding the product search completion rate. So this is going to be a different endpoint within my application. And so, a real world scenario might be that I receive an alert that notifies me that, hey, users are not able to successfully navigate the product search capability within the application. So let's go ahead and jump right into Grafana once more and essentially dive search capability. And so here what I'm noticing is that we have 97% of our requests that are successful. All right, everything looks green. So I'm going to keep moving along until I can really understand the why behind, the reason for why the product search completion rate is dropping. So we're also noticing that the SLO availability is at 97%, so no worries there. Now, as I move along here, I'm noticing that my product search API latency is pretty healthy as well, around 1.5 to 2 seconds, so no worries there. We've got some pretty consistent, network traffic through to this product search API endpoint. And now my first red flag on this dashboard is the product search completion and abandonment rate. The abandonment rate is really high at 47%, which tells me that end users aren't able to successfully search through products on this application, which is clearly not only a technical business impacting and revenue impacting issue. And so this is critical. So what I'd like to do is similar to the first workflow, I'll go ahead and dive into kind of the back-end performance here. And once again, kind of diving into the CPU and memory usage to see if those resources are well optimized, if they're overutilized or underutilized. All right. So here we are once again. I'm noticing that my CPU looks healthy, 40%, no worries there. My memory usage is at 70%, or rather 75%. We've got, once again, some consistent network traffic as well. So throughout my investigation, everything overall looked healthy on both the back end as well as within the data that we're visualizing for SLOs, latency, and more. So I'm going to continue on in my investigation through the front end and continue on through this flow. So here on this dashboard for the front end specifically, we have a ton of really helpful metrics. So we're noticing our checkout completion and abandonment looks healthy, especially after I optimize the resources that those processes rely on. And moving forward here, the product search completion and abandonment, the data that's being pulled in from Embrace matches up with what I was seeing on the first dashboard we were looking at for the product search API completion. All right, and as we move along, I also have a lot of really helpful network data, such as the network request to allow me to visualize the traffic flowing through here. And then we also have our network spans. So we'll go ahead and dive into those and take a look at some of the network activity and traces pertaining to those network spans. All right. So what's really nice about Grafana is I have the ability to dive into all of my telemetry, whether that's metrics, logs, or traces, which makes everything really nice and easy. So taking a look at the front end performance, once again, everything looks healthy. We have a tiny bit of latency, but that's not necessarily a red flag here. And as I expand out the trace spans, I get a ton of metadata around this particular service request. And not only that, but I also have the particular URL to pivot into Embrace and continue my investigation. And that's where I would love to hand it back and to send this URL over to Isa to continue his investigation.
All right, thank you, Naima. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into a specific user session from somebody that went through the product search flow and abandoned. So what Naima was able to do is essentially kind of do a pat down of the backend systems and the product search service and notice that nothing was kind of, amiss in terms of the backend of this mobile app. Everything was running as it should. So kind of the final step when it comes to that investigation process is taking a deep dive into kind of the front end and specifically the user session to see what could have gone wrong within that user session to cause a user to essentially kind of drop out of that product search. And so immediately what I can see is I can see, across every single user session for this specific user, there is an ANR that occurs at the beginning of that user session. We can even see that right here. And so if I scroll down to the user session, we can see the user starts the application, um, you know, essentially kind of enters as a guest, and then is immediately hit with a couple of ANRs. So to give you guys some context in terms of what an ANR is, in Android applications, when the application essentially stops responding, so when it freezes and the user is clicking all over the application and kind of nothing is going on, that's considered an ANR, an application not responding. And so you'll even get a pop-up message that says, application not responding. Do you want to wait or do you want to, force quit the application? And so that's the issue that's, essentially being affected right here. And so I can see this occurs, immediately right before the product search. And so that's why users are essentially dropping off. Um, these ANRs are also about 15 seconds long. And what I can do within Embrace is I can dive into this specific ANR that's occurring and investigate it further, from a mobile developer's perspective. And so immediately what I'll do is I'll switch over to the prioritization view. And so what we're seeing here is we're seeing essentially a flame graph of this ANR, and we can see every single method. That the application runs through when it comes to this ANR, and we can specifically see the methods that the application is hanging on the most. And so immediately this method right here jumps out at me as I can see the application is hanging on for almost 15 seconds. And so I do know an update went out on the application yesterday. We released a new version. And so most likely that new version had some sort of UI, issue when it comes to compose. And so that could be causing this ANR. And so what I'll do is I'll actually, take a screenshot of this ANR view, and I'll send this over to our mobile team to again push out a fix for this on our latest version. As it seems to be a pretty quick fix, we have identified that the method that the application is hanging on, and we just need to push an update. And so overall, that was pretty easy when it came to kind of nailing down the exact source of the issue in terms of product search. So it's essentially an ANR. The application is essentially freezing right before product search. Um, and we were able to do that by visualizing essentially kind of everything that's going on in the back end and then shifting over to the front end user session and tying everything up there. And so this is a very reactive way when it comes to, um, when it comes to observability. So we're kind of reacting to user complaints, reacting to these issues after they happen. And what we want to do is we want to essentially kind of shift forward to more of a proactive approach. And so what I noticed when I was looking at the front end metrics dashboard that Naima was going over is we don't really have an ANR metric in there. And so with the Embrace and Grafana integration, what we can do is we can essentially create custom metrics within our platform and Embrace here, and we can forward those metrics to Grafana to be visualized in dashboards like the one Naima was showing. And I think it'd be really helpful in this case if we had a specific ANR count dashboard, within Grafana. And so what I'll do is I'll go over to our dashboarding section within Embrace. I see our team has already created an ANR dashboard within Embrace to visualize these ANRs. And I can see the exact spike right here that caused our product search issue. And so what I'll do is I'll turn this dashboard right here, this ANR dashboard, into a custom metric. I can edit or filter this custom metric. I think I'll leave it as is. And then I can click right here to forward that metric to Grafana Cloud in 5-minute, hourly, and daily increments as well. And so this metric will then be forwarded directly into Grafana Cloud. We also have another option in terms of making this metric available via the Embrace Metrics API. And so if you guys want to query this metric, set up a data source in Grafana and query our metrics API for this metric, in whatever intervals you choose to do so, that's an ability as well. And so I'll create this metric here for future purposes and send a quick note to Naima to include it in the front end Embrace metrics dashboard. Um, but yeah, that's it. Seems like we kind of solved our issues, and we essentially kind of did a nice little update to our Grafana setup as well.